Hey everybody, Moffat's leaving! After a 10th season, which isn't airing until spring 2017. And we're only getting another Christmas special this year. Oh, yay, only another 11 months until another Moffat Christmas special. Can hardly wait. But still, only another 13 episodes left and then I get a new arch-nemesis, so people can stop complaining that I rag on Moffat too much and start complaining that I rag on Chibnall too much. Hooray for maintenance of the status quo. As far as Moffat leaving's concerned, I didn't want to think, well, it's about time. I've always been trying to convince myself that I'm a Moffat fan trapped inside someone whose mind wanders halfway through his episodes and starts playing solitaire on his phone. I still think this could have been a great era for New Who if he'd had a steady guiding hand to tell him no more often. If he'd had a Philip Hinchcliffe type character stood over his shoulder knocking his hand away and going, "No, Moffat, the entirety of Time of the Doctor needs to be chucked into a massive fire," then this could have been some of the best TV ever made. I kinda did have a feeling he'd be leaving soon. Not because I'm satisfied with any of the vague conclusions that he's reached in the 3 or 4 of his loose ends that he hasn't lost track of, but because I can't be the only one who was just wondering whether they were just going to keep doing mystery box, old Who villain, teasing about the mystery box, old Who villain, vague hints that there might be more to this ending than there actually is. Christmas special! And if so, what does anyone hope to artistically achieve from that? And does anyone really think something so reliant on tropes has a decent lifespan in it? I also kind of had a feeling that there was going to be no Doctor Who this year. I say had a feeling, what I mean was kind of hoping there wouldn't be so I could clear my schedule and do some other stuff. But fortunately we've been told who Moffat's replacement is about 2 years in advance, so you'd think there's a lot for me to talk about there, but there really isn't, because I just don't find Chris Chibnall that interesting. At least nowhere near as interesting as the events surrounding this handover. I can barely even call this an anticlimax because they've done exactly what I expected them to do, because I seem to be one of a distressingly small amount of people who thinks New Who being an auteur-driven series is a massive problem. You ideally need a team of people collaborating on a format like this for reasons I blather on about all the fucking time. But given there are still enough people out there under the impression that Moffat is a genius, and if you only got one person, you only have to pay one person, and the Beeb's not exactly in the money at the moment, it was always pretty obvious they would pick a name at random from recent writers on the show, particularly if one of said writers has managed to find success outside of Doctor Who. Well, there you go, Chibnall was always going to be their choice. And it is certainly Chibnall finding success outside of Doctor Who that got the approval for the showrunner status, because given just how many Whovians have found his past work on the show grating, and the fact that this was the quote that immediately sprung to my mind when it was announced.
When we woke up the next morning, a dog was pissing on our tent.
I kind of feel a bit sorry for Chibnall, and by extension most newer writers who accidentally write something Who-related that's panned by most of the fandom. We're such a bitter bunch of moany twats that even if you manage to forge a successful TV career outside of the show, we're always going to remember you for the worst thing you ever did. But I had a feeling they'd do this because the fact there were articles about Moffat and the Beebs searching for a new showrunner really not that long ago, and there were all these people saying that allegedly Season 9 was supposed to be Moffat's swan song, it appeared as though they were struggling to find someone with enough talent, enthusiasm, reputation, and importantly, free schedule, in order to fill the role in a similar way to Moffat. We don't exactly have a second Moffat on hand this time. There hasn't really been anyone other than Mark who's been writing an episode every year, let alone someone who keeps churning out something that gets critically acclaimed every time. So this was always going to be measured on someone who's had success outside of Doctor Who. We don't really have a situation of, wrote Blink, there you go. Things do look a lot different to how they did at the last handover. We all have our favourites. Some people did like Mark for the job, some people really like Neil Cross, and I will admit here, yes, I do see why. But there hasn't really been someone unifying, turning in stuff that we can mostly agree on the merits of this time. But I would have argued that that's all the more reason to go searching outside of the current writing staff to find someone new with fresh input. There was that small spark of optimism inside of me going, maybe they won't play it so utterly safe to the point of tripping over the wet floor sign and falling into a conveniently placed bed of spikes. Maybe we could have had a newer writer who's recently written and directed a small movie that no one's heard of, but the few people who have seen it think it's awesome. The hipster in me definitely showing there. Maybe we could have had a team of like 3 newer people keen to try new and interesting things with the format. Because there's so much more that could be done with it than what Moffat's been doing. And really, shouldn't the Beeb be cultivating fresh talent? I mean, yeah, a project like this requires experience, but New Who's writing staff almost always being at least 70% composed of people who've been big-name writers in the industry for quite a long time, or people who we're very familiar with already, and the showrunner always being someone very familiar with the franchise. Really, I'm just struggling to see how the high-ups at the Beeb see a future in that if they're not offering younger writers the opportunity to prove their worth. I mean, sure, it's risky, but that's what creativity's supposed to be all about. Risks. And that's ultimately my biggest problem with the Chibnall announcement. He's probably the safest bet there is. They're just fucking playing it safe to the point of impotence. Okay, that was a lie I made up to make it sound good. No, my biggest problem with the Chibnall announcement was, couldn't we have got someone who wouldn't refer to Moffat as a genius in their very first press release? Just people who call Moffat a genius and actually mean it. You do know that that's a running joke among the rest of us, right? So, Chibnall. Let's talk about Chibnall. Okay, I will give him this. He has been getting better in recent years. He is admittedly not the man he once was, who appeared to legitimately think that...
When we woke up the next morning, a dog was pissing on our tent.
Was a fucking serious moment. He's not the guy who wrote about an alien gas that fucks people to death anymore. Now he's the guy who writes about seasides and dead children. So, you know, obviously the guy for the job. And Broadchurch... I know that Broadchurch sounds like my kind of thing. It's a mystery, it's pretentious, it's depressing, full of droning music, and it's got some interesting themes, but for some reason I just think it's overrated. Oh god, please don't hit me, Broadchurch fans. I just find it boring. Is that so wrong? Twin Peaks FTW. Broadchurch. Sad people in a happy location. Because that's like contrast, yeah? Episode 1. Oh my god! A child has died! Why, God? Why? Episode 2. I wonder who killed the child. Let's investigate. Episode 3. We're so sad about the child that's dead. Episode 4. We're still sad about the child that's dead. Episode 5. This dead child case is tearing me up inside. I hope we find the murderer before the end of the series. Episode 6 and 7. We're still sad. I still don't know who the murderer is. Episode 8. Oh my god, the murderer was that member of the cast all along. Season 2. Well, there still hasn't been another murder, but everyone's still sad about the first murder. That'll fill 8 hours of TV, won't it? Just me? Yeah, it is just me, isn't it? I mean, I will give him the benefit of the doubt for the time being. I don't particularly hate his Doctor Who work like some fans do. Cyberwoman and Day One were written very early on in Torchwood's development to a strict brief, and during the phase where everyone was realising that the show does not work in the way that Russell originally envisioned it. 42 and the Silurian two-parter were alright, I guess. They have their fans, they weren't horrible or anything. I was one of the very few people who liked Dinosaurs on a Spaceship quite a bit, and aside from the odd wanky pretentious bit here and there and the fucking abysmal third act, The Power of Three could have been pretty awesome. And hell, since he wrote a TV series about dead children and feeling sad, maybe when he's in charge of the direction of the series, Chibnall will come out with something a lot different to what we've seen from him previously. And maybe he'll actually have Doctor Who showing some maturity like I've been fucking banging on about how it should by about a decade into its lifetime. However, that previous paragraph should not be taken to mean give him free rein. No. Very important thing here. We do not want another, oh my god, such a genius, ego-stroking session on our hands again. Get him some people who aren't afraid to say no to him. He doesn't have nearly as much good faith among the fandom as Moffat did, so maybe the high-ups at the Beeb are going to ensure that happens. Fingers crossed. While I'm not too over the moon about this, based on past experience with Chibnall's work, and seriously think that they could have done a much better job of finding a new showrunner, I will make it perfectly clear here, I am ready as ever to be proven wrong.